What's up, everybody? It's Caroline here from the Duolingo English Test team with tips to help you test your best. In this video, we're talking all about scoring. How is the DET scored? What criteria are we looking for? And what do your scores mean? So we'll start with the basics. The Duolingo English Test is scored on a scale from 10 to 160 in 5-point increments. The overall score on the Duolingo English Test is aligned with the CEFR, or Common European Framework of Reference, an international standard of language proficiency. In addition to your overall score, you'll also be measured on 4 subscores on the Duolingo English Test. On the DET, subscores are measuring integrated modalities, which basically means they're evaluating 2 language proficiency skills at once. So the 4 subscores on the DET are conversation, which measures your ability to speak and listen, comprehension, which measures your ability to read and listen, production, which measures your ability to speak and write, and literacy, which measures your ability to read and write. These are also evaluated on a scale from 10 to 160 in 5-point increments. Pay attention to your university requirements because many universities are looking for an overall score as well as a requirement on each of the 4 subscores. It's important to note that the overall score is not a sum or average of the 4 subscores. The overall score and the 4 subscores are each calculated independently, and they're weighted by the questions that contribute to each of those scores. So if you're curious about which question types contribute to which subscore, I will link our test readiness page in the description box down below, and you can find out there. And another great resource for this is our Subscores video, which is on our YouTube channel, and I will also link that. The Duolingo English Test is a machine-scored exam, which means that all test sessions are evaluated by automated scoring models. These models are created by human experts in the fields of applied linguistics, machine learning, natural language processing, and more. These AI scoring models are trained to evaluate language proficiency the same way that expert human raters do. You might be asking, how do these AI scoring models work? Well, the answer is, it depends on the question type. For the question types on the Duolingo English Test that have a correct or incorrect answer, your response is compared to the correct answer and you receive partial credit for any part of your answer that is correct. When it comes to open response questions, which are questions like the writing and speaking sample or the describe the image tasks, where you have to generate your own language in a written or spoken response, the scoring gets a little more complex. There are many different linguistic features that contribute to your score on these question types, and I'm going to review some of them with you now. So the first area we're going to talk about is the content of your response. This basically refers to the substance of what you wrote or said. There are a couple different features we're looking at in the content. One is task relevance. I've mentioned this in previous videos. It basically refers to how on task you stay. So are you focused on the question that is being asked? So try not to talk about something that's not related to the question. Also make sure you're answering all parts of the question that's being asked. Next is your style. So are you using an appropriate level of formality for the task? So some tasks might be more informal, like a first-person story about yourself, and some might be more formal, where you're talking about something academic or a nonfiction topic. Next, we're looking at development, which basically just refers to how well you develop your ideas. A good strategy to keep in mind for development is to make your main point and then support it with multiple pieces of evidence or supporting ideas. And the last thing we're looking at is the overall effect of your response on either the reader or listener. So did you communicate your ideas in a way that was effective, engaging, and accomplishes all parts of the task? The next area we're going to look at is called coherence, and this refers to how easy it is to follow or understand your response. So one of the features of coherence is clarity. This is basically how clear is your response, how easy is it to understand your response. The next is cohesion, which refers to how connected your ideas are. So you should be using linking expressions and appropriate pronouns to connect similar ideas together. Next is the progression of your thoughts. So is the order logical? Does the argument make sense? And finally, for writing tasks, we're looking at the overall structure of your response. So you should always try to have an introduction and a conclusion where possible. Next, we're looking at your vocabulary to help evaluate your English proficiency. There are a couple different features of vocabulary that you can keep in mind to use your best skills. The first is diversity. So are you using a lot of different words? Are you avoiding repetition? Are you showing off all the vocabulary that you know in English? The next is sophistication, which means how high level or rare are the words that you're using. Are you using basic level English words that we use every day, or are you using some more complex or advanced terms that you might see in a university classroom? Next is word choice, and this one's pretty simple. It just means, do the words make sense where you're using them? Are you using the words appropriately? The next feature we're looking at is word formation, which means, are you forming words correctly? A good example of this is whether or not you're using the right part of speech, so adjectives, nouns, and verbs all in the right place. And finally, for writing tasks, spelling does count on the Duolingo English test, so make sure you pay attention when you're writing your responses that all your words are spelled correctly. The next area we're going to look at is everyone's favorite, grammar. We probably all know what grammar is or have studied it in our own language in school, but grammar basically refers to a set of rules or structures that make up a language. So for the DET, we're looking at a few features. One is grammatical complexity. This refers to how advanced and varied your grammar structures are. So thinking about creating different sentence structures, using those grammatical features in an advanced way. The second feature is grammatical accuracy. This one is pretty straightforward. It just means, is your grammar correct? Are you using it accurately? So some examples in this category would be like subject-verb agreement or using the proper verb tense. And finally, for writing tasks, punctuation does count. So make sure you're using all your punctuation marks, your question marks, periods, commas, apostrophes, all appropriately. And the last area we'll talk about is pronunciation, and this category really only applies to the speaking tasks. So the first thing we're looking at in pronunciation is called intelligibility. This is a pretty big word for a simple concept, which is, can we understand what you're saying? The next thing we're looking at is individual sounds. So are you pronouncing all of the vowel and consonant sounds properly? Remember that all varieties of standard English pronunciation are acceptable on the DET as long as your response is comprehensible. Next, we're looking at word stress. So stress refers to where you place the emphasis. For word stress, we're considering the syllables and if you're placing the emphasis on the correct syllables. We also look at sentence stress, which is a similar concept, but it refers to where you're placing the emphasis on words in a sentence. Finally, we're also looking at the intonation or the rise and fall of your voice while speaking. A good example for this is that for yes or no questions in American English, we tend to have a rising intonation at the end of the question. So, are you hungry? You can hear how my voice goes up. It's me from the future wearing a different shirt because I completely forgot the last category, which is called fluency. So fluency refers to the speed and ease of your speech. So there's a couple different dimensions we're looking at for fluency. The first one is, of course, the speed. So there's no exact, perfect, or ideal rate of speech, but your message should be able to be understood efficiently and easily by your listener. Second is something called chunking. Chunking refers to your use of pauses in a sentence. So there's natural places for pauses to go, like after grammatical units or when you're trying to add emphasis somewhere. There's unnatural pauses which occur when you're trying to find a word or you can't figure out how to say something. And finally, we're looking at breakdowns and repairs. This basically refers to your use of filler words like or like, or repetition, or starting and stopping with your speech. Of course, some of this behavior is totally natural, but too much of it starts to affect how well we can understand you. So that's all the features we'll be talking about in today's video, but I think the main idea that I want you guys to take away is that the DET is really evaluating all aspects of your language. So the best way to improve your score or prepare for the test is really to improve your English proficiency. So practice English daily. But I hope this video was helpful and helped you understand how scoring works. If you have any more questions, please leave them in the comments down below. And I will see you guys in the next video. Bye, test takers.